Welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patti Kasper. This podcast is for those who are living with the effects of prenatal exposure to alcohol, their loved ones, and anyone else wanting to learn more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. Each week, you'll hear from someone whose expertise is either professional or living experience with FASD. I'm your host, Patti Kasper, bringing you both. Now let's get started with another candid conversation. And welcome back to another candid conversation on living with FASD. Today, I'm very excited to welcome back Dr. Christie Petrenko from University of Rochester, who is a jet setter for the sake of FASD, going hither, thither, and yon, making presentations and educating and advocating. And today she joins me to talk about the current research projects at U Rochester and how you as the viewer or listener can get involved. So Christie, welcome back to the podcast. So good to have you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a joy last time, and I'm excited to have a chance today to just talk and share some of the work that we're doing that might be of interest to your listeners.
Yeah, that would be great. So the last time we were talking about research also, and was it the same app as what you were planning on discussing today? And if it's a different app, how did that first project wrap up?
You're really testing my memory. Honestly, I'm trying to recall which we actually have quite a few projects right now across our research faculty and some of our talented students. Um, I'm guessing we probably talked about our parent app last time called FMF Connect.
That may have been it. Yeah.
Yes. And what I would love to share a lot about today is our newer app called My Health Coach that is specifically designed with and for adults with FASD. This has been one of my favorite projects because we had the opportunity to co-design this project with the Adult Leadership Collaborative of FASD Changemakers. And so
Wonderful bunch.
just been such a fun project to brainstorm ideas together, really making sure it's meeting the goals and needs of a wide range of folks, from people with living experience, sharing their expertise, and, our engineering team and our psychologists, and just a really nice group of people coming together, excited about creating some supports because there's not a lot out there, unfortunately.
There's not. There's not. So let's start with the obvious. What all is the app capable of, and who would it be most ideally suited for?
Yeah, so the app so this project actually started back in 2021. We've been really developing it over time. So we're adding new functions and content each time we go. So we went through like an initial design process and came up with some core ideas. Then we moved through like a beta testing study that we did about a year and a half ago. And based on people's feedback, we've continued to improve the app. So the current app has a number of components. It really centers around an health coach, which is a chatbot. So it makes it really engaging and easy to find what you need in the app because you text back and forth with the chatbot that helps you figure out what things might be useful for you. So
That's cool.
And so our chatbot is getting better and better each time we do it, especially as technology is improving over time quickly. But in addition, we have one of our most popular features is our tracking tools, which creates opportunities for people to, if they need to set trackers for their medication, reminders for when to take meds. Sometimes people use it to remind themselves to eat or to go to different activities or appointments. And so those can really be customized for each person. We also have another popular feature. It was originally a strengths assessment, and now it's it's shaping up to be a strengths gym is kind of what it's called, where people go through and sort of rate their own strengths or things they'd like to grow. And there are different activities in the app that help promote the use and practice of those strengths. There's a library of fact sheets. There's some that you can use yourself or share with other people in your life. There is a nice little tip of the day or message of the day feature that cover a range of things, just kind of remind you each day of, some positives or a new fact, and kind of daily check-in that might ask you about, your physical health, your mental health, how you slept, a positive activity. And then based on your answer, it might give you suggestions for other things that would help. So a wide range, and with feedback in our studies, we'll probably continue to grow and make it better and better each time.
Okay. So it sounds like one of the things that it really helps with are the short-term memory challenges that many of us face.
Yeah. And we are ALC partners in this project, from their lay of the land surveys they've done over time, both on physical health and the quality of life, really spoke to the impact that memory has on daily life. And having those memory supports all in one place that make it easy with something you use regularly with your phone, can really help support folks in doing those daily life tasks and keeping it going. So that was something that they really emphasized as we were developing the app.
Okay. Are there other challenges in particular that this addresses very well?
Yeah, so I think one thing that came up and as we were developing the app is, some of the physical health challenges that people face, and just being able to keep track of your symptoms and then being able to share those with your medical provider when you have an appointment, remembering what they were, looking across time. And so the app can, as you report each day on any symptoms you might have, it can track those for you and put them all in one place. So when you go to your visit, you can be like, here we go. You also can add your doctor's appointments on in the app, and it can remind you like, hey, you have a doctor appointment coming up tomorrow. You know,
No.
do you want the list of symptoms you've been tracking so you can share with your provider? So it has the ability to help with the physical health parts too.
Okay.
So we've really tried to put together, what is the latest research we have? What is the living experience of people? How do people actually use their phone and the apps? Like how will all of those things come together to support people? And so, as we keep learning, we keep trying to improve those resources for folks. And
Mhm.
so I think you had asked earlier who this app is suited for.
Yeah.
So it was designed for adults 18 years and up who have a smartphone, which is just about most people.
Right.
It's accessible for Android devices, iOS devices. So that's most phones. And we have it available in our study for anyone in the world who can work with English. We only have it in English. So you have to be an English speaker or somebody. We actually had somebody that in our last study from Italy who translated with Google Translate some of the content to be able to engage with it. But
That's
we
awesome.
hope in the future to offer it in more languages. But right now it's English, but open to anyone in the world who would like to do that.
How many people are you looking for? And what phase of research is this? Like, is this one of the last things you're going to be doing before it's launched for general consumption or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is our what we call a randomized control trial. So we're looking for 120 adults around the world who want to try out the app. And in this phase of the research, we're really looking to see, does the app work? Does it help people? In our prior studies, we began by, really just saying, what do you want in the app and design features? Then we went to our beta testing where we're like, does the app work on a phone beside that's not in our lab? Like in
Yeah.
the wild, does it work on different people's phones? Do people like it? People have all kinds of different devices, their own settings, their own technological abilities. So we had a study about a year and a half ago where we did that with about 40 people, and we learned a lot about what people wanted. And
Can
so
I
now
share a
we're,
funny story about
yeah,
doing research and being out in the wild?
yeah.
Because I'm a great supporter and proponent for participating in research if you have living experience. And so I found myself in Santa Barbara participating in a research study from Omnipod, which is a type of insulin pump.
Oh,
And they were beta testing which of two algorithms needed to be in their final project. And I showed up for a weekend there with my service dog. And most of the time, you don't leave the unit.
yeah.
Except when you have a dog, you have to leave the unit.
Yeah, you do.
So I'm walking the dog around the building with a team of people following behind me with their laptop.
Yeah. It's interesting, and so when we were doing the beta testing, we found, there are, you know, Apple iOS devices usually only support a certain number of operating system versions before they make you upgrade, right? So it's pretty tight. Whereas Android is really like the Wild West. They support a lot of different things. So we found we had to adjust some of the settings to allow some of the older devices to still be able to run. There are a few bugs and glitches that come up when you have a wide range of phones and different settings. So that was really helpful. Plus, we had people try it out. We got to see which features people liked the most, which one they used, what they didn't really that weren't that excited about. And so that helped us improve the app. And so now we're at our current, we really think this is like the big trial. It's called a randomized control trial where you really look to see, does the app actually work for people and does it benefit them? And so we're trying to get 120 people around the world to do the study. They do a couple of surveys at the beginning. We send the app to half of the group right away. The other group is our wait list. Then we have them all do surveys again, and then the people on our wait list get the app as well after that point. But we need to see, what does it look like when you use the app versus when you don't, and then does that actually help? And so once this big trial is done, if we can show that it's helpful, that gives us really good evidence that this should be something out in the world people can use.
Mhm.
So then we move to getting the app into the app stores for anyone who wants to download it to use. So that's kind of our really careful process
Mhm.
that we use in research to really help make sure that what we're creating and designing is one really worth people's time and efforts and is meeting the needs of people who want to use it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a huge piece of the ALC's contribution. Yeah, that's exciting. So just out of curiosity, because I'm a curious kind of person, what were there any features, and if so, what were they, that the idea was like, oh, this would be genius, but the beta testing said, yeah, maybe not.
Our results didn't find any area that people just didn't like. We
Okay.
found people used the library of fact sheets less than we might have expected. And we got some feedback about how to make that look better on the phone in terms of, it's a small
Yeah,
device, right? So
yeah.
we came up with some different options of ways to view the content that made it, one, easier to kind of digest, but then still having the option of being able to print or send the smaller fact sheet, like you would print it
Right.
off in the phone too. So having both options. We also had some relaxation exercises. There was, one person that we hired to do voiceover that people just didn't really jive with the voice. So we ditched those audios. And people really also wanted something visual to go along with just the audio. So we had anticipated that, but weren't able to build it in time for the original beta test. So we've been working on making that look better and more polished as we go. But you also recognize that there's a wide range of people and folks are going to have different preferences. So
Yeah.
we've tried to create opportunities in the app for customization so
Mhm.
that each person can really, you know, select what's going to work best for them and really tailor the app to meet their individual needs. So there are some choice points and options. We tried not to make it too many choices, but so there's this like fine balance of
Yeah.
being able to customize but not being overwhelming.
Yeah. All right. So next question, how do people sign up for this?
Yeah. Well, we have a link that I will give you to put in your show notes that people can click on. We also have some different flyers with QR codes and different information that we're sending around. But once people have access to that link, they can go on to a survey that they can provide some basic information about themselves and do some screening questions to make sure they're eligible. There's also a short video or a document that you can read through to learn more about the study and make sure you understand the risks and benefits, if that's going to be a good choice for you. And then, if that all looks good, then our team will then send you the next steps.
Imagine there would be much of a risk other than where you're using your phone. There's always the potential for privacy issues, hackers and all that kind of stuff.
Of course.
But not that it ever stops anyone from sharing their business,
Yeah.
myself included. What other risks might there be?
So with any research, there's always some risk. This is a low risk study. That's how it's classified. But we have things like you might get bored, you might not like it. The biggest risk is, of course, confidentiality. And privacy. We use the highest state of the art encryption and best practices for app design. But there's always bad actors out there that keep learning. Our study, we keep getting a lot of fake people trying to sign up for the study. We're pretty good at catching people that are fake and not letting them into the study. That impacts us more than it wouldn't really impact any of the participants who do the app because there's not any way that people using the app are connecting with each other in the app. It's really just each individual. And those people, aren't accessing our systems, but they could make the quality of our data a problem. If people who are not individuals with FASD who are trying to sign up for our study just to get financial compensation,
Oh,
there's
okay.
almost every study we do, and many of my colleagues, increasingly, there are more and more bad actors out there who are using bots, who are trying to sign up for studies.
Mhm.
I've heard of a colleague in Canada who's doing some really great research on justice system and youth, have had people come on to like interviews pretending to be a young person and not having their video on. And when they make them turn their video on just to do an identity check, it's like a middle-aged man. And they're like, which one of you is the youth? You know? So we had a lot of people in a past study pretending to be mental health providers that from the US that were not in the US and were not mental health providers trying to get the financial incentive. They had to work pretty hard to get that too, which
Yeah.
it's just disappointing because it can really, if you aren't skilled at catching them, they could really mess up your data and ruin your studies.
Yeah.
So,
So you did open the door to that question. What does that compensation look like?
yeah. We compensate folks for each set of research studies they do. So the first set, they get $40 for doing that set of surveys. And then after half the group tries the app out, we have them do follow-up surveys and
Mhm.
they get another $40 for that. We also have a third time point several weeks later where they get another $40 for doing surveys. So for people doing the study, if they do all the different studies, all the different surveys, they can get a total of $120.
Okay. And so how long a period, what is the time commitment? How many weeks?
Yeah. It's a 12-week study. So we have surveys at 6 weeks and at 12 weeks.
Okay.
And so that's about 3 months in total. People can choose to use the app as much as they want that works for them. But we just have, and each of those surveys, it varies how long it takes people, but I would guess about 20 to 30 minutes at most, but it's going to depend. We also have the ability, if people prefer, they can do the surveys with one of my research team on Zoom if that's easier, if they prefer that, or they can do it on their own or, with a support person online.
And that's marvelous because I've worked with many people that just they're so uncomfortable with reading and writing and their comprehension, and it makes them very anxious. So having that Zoom option or using your support person, that's awesome.
And, because we did that beta testing study, we also had a chance to try out and make sure our surveys were understandable. And, one of the other big pieces of feedback the ALC gave us while we were partnering on this study was that sometimes those research scales, where there might be 5 options and, a little to like a lot or disagree a lot, agree a lot.
Yeah,
Like those can be really
strongly disagree.
those can be really confusing,
Okay.
especially trying to figure out how to answer those. So we actually came up with a scale that we've been using and that seemed to really work for a lot of people where there's a visual like stair step with like a frowny face and a smiley face with like the numbers that and a
Okay.
training video to make sure people felt comfortable using the scale. And we
Mhm.
use the same scale across all the items.
Yeah.
And we chunk all the ones that have the stair going up together and the ones with the stair going down together so that it was easier to just
Yeah.
answer these
Yeah.
questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that can be the way you word a question.
Yeah. And the ALC members would probably laugh about this too. We spent many meetings going through every item on the surveys to make sure that it was worded in the clearest way that was most concrete and not as confusing for people. We changed a lot of the wording of items to make sure that it was really getting at the essence of
Yeah.
what people
Yeah.
needed to answer.
I can imagine there would be some very humorous meetings
Oh,
around.
yes. Yes. And our group has the best sense of humor. So we were joking so
Yeah.
much during our meetings. And I know you've talked with a lot of the ALC
I
members too.
know I adore them all.
So it was rarely a dull meeting, which is one reason why they're some of my favorite
Yeah.
projects and meetings because it's just lively.
Yeah.
Whereas not all research meetings are that lively, which is unfortunate. So,
Yeah. I actually feel sorry for people that take life so seriously that they, can't crack a joke or smile every now and then.
yeah.
And what else do you guys have going on at U Rochester?
Yeah, so we have, it's actually a really exciting time for research with adults with FASD. For so many years there was like nothing. And now it feels like they're starting to just really grow. So we actually have 2 projects right now that are focused on adults. The second, we just talked about my health coach. The
Mhm.
second one we're calling Thrive, and it's been a really cool program as well. And we're in I would call it that like beta testing phase. So this is not an app. This is a program where it's specifically for young adults, so 18 to 25 or so, and where we have a facilitator that meets with the young adult to over a number of sessions to learn a bit about them, what their life looks like, helps them figure out, what are some goals they would like to achieve, and then do some activities to figure out who is in their social support network. We're all interdependent on each other, right? And so it's helping young adults figure out, what do they want to do? What are some of their goals and how to really work within their support network to make progress on those. And so we have that first phase And then what's cool about this project is we have the opportunity to bring in some of those network members with the facilitator and the young adult, and it's very person-centered. So these are the young adults' goals and really helping that team come together and really rally while helping the young adult, build these skills to figure out like it's hard to ask for help. It really is. And so it's hard for everyone to ask for help or to know what you even need. So it's a program where we really help facilitate that. So we have developed the first draft of all the sessions. And again, this project, we love community engaged work. And so we have planning groups that are helping us design this. And because this program is really working with individuals with FASD, their supporters, as well as facilitators or providers. We have different groups of people that are helping us design that. So one of my talented graduate students is working with the self-advocate group. And so we have a couple people from the ALC and other folks who this is kind of a new opportunity for them.
Yeah.
So we got our self-advocate group. I run our supporters group. So a lot of, different family members or folks who are in sort of support advocacy roles. And then we have a provider group that the postdoc in my lab is coordinating because we wanted to really think about what type of provider or facilitator would run this kind of program? Where would it live? And so those groups of people have helped us shape and continue to help us shape this program.
Okay.
We've also had the opportunity to partner with FASD United in this. So one of our ideas of how this program could live on in the future would be through FASD United or its affiliates. So we're in this beta phase. We want to try that out early
Yeah.
to see, does that work? How much training or what's your background going to look like to be a good facilitator for this? So we have a couple of FASD United staffers who are delivering the program with us and seeing how that goes so that we can, so we've got the first 5 young adults doing the program, and we're getting their feedback and we're going to keep making it better. And we're hoping to enroll another 5 young adults who want to help us with this program and help them with their.
So are you envisioning a second link for the podcast notes where people can reach out to you to participate in this one as well?
Absolutely. I will send that to some bullet points so people know which ones are a good fit for them. So I
Yeah.
will definitely send that to you. So
Okay.
we're in that beta testing phase. So we're going to look for about another 5 more adults for this phase.
Okay.
And then we're going to take all of that feedback and continue to improve the program. And then we're expecting later this calendar year, towards the winter, to do that bigger trial.
Mhm.
Probably that study will need about 60 adults in the winter. And it's all over Zoom. So that study is anybody in the US.
Okay.
And so if folks are interested, it's a cool opportunity to help shape programming.
And that's huge. And, just as even though I have never used the product from Omnipod, I'm still very proud of my contribution to it. And so that really is meaningful for any viewer or listener right now, who's considering maybe, when I was doing the research for my book Sip by Sip, and I had candid conversations with 12 other adults living with FASD, with really without exception, everyone looked for ways to pay it forward. Once they realized that their life struggles had to do with prenatal alcohol exposure, they wanted to pay it forward to the community in some way, either through advocacy or just spreading awareness within their own small circles. Because, 1 in 20, everybody knows a lot of people who are affected, who most of whom just don't know it yet.
Yeah. So I hear that a lot too.
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
able to make the road easier for those coming after you. And so for, both of these studies, the My Health Coach app and the Thrive program, is that from the very beginning of programs and tools that we work on, we're always thinking about where will this live once we're done with the research? Because, I love research and, I put my nerdy research hat and I think about theories and cool designs and like, how do we, improve the knowledge? But I'm also really trying to think practically. Like, how do we design from the beginning something that as soon as we're done can be accessible to people? So I like combining that being practical with doing the cool nerdy research.
Yeah.
So
Well, the app just seems amazing. The health coach app. It sounds so much. Yeah, I can tell just by listening these few minutes, so much thought has gone into it. To expand its application beyond just a very narrow look at things, to make it truly useful in a broad swath of your day-to-day living. So I applaud you guys for that.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I hope you don't, I thought of something that I'd love to raise for discussion that was not part of our conversation, and I hope you're okay with exploring this, and if you're not, that's fine too. But there's been a lot of attention on the focus these recent days, weeks, and months on autism. We know with Bobby Kennedy Jr., it's a cause near and dear to his heart, and I applaud that. But I think, like last week, the comment was, "We will find the cause." Well, I don't think there's one cause. In the news this morning, they said that just in the last couple of years, the rates have gone, it seems to have exploded again to 1 in 31. And it struck me, now, if you look in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for, what kind of label we're going to put on anyone's quirks and symptoms and blah, blah, blah. Everything that qualifies someone for autism can also be describing someone with FASD. And it just kind of struck me, well, yeah, if there's a major explosion over the last handful of years, that's when our alcohol sales went through the roof because of the COVID lockdowns. I wonder how many of these are true autism diagnoses and how many are misdiagnoses because we're really looking at FASD. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, my first thought is I wish I had a couple of my colleagues who just did a phenomenal presentation at the FASD International Conference, specifically on FASD and autism, the areas that sort of overlap, the distinctions, and really kind of, are digging into some of these complex issues. I know a bit and I have thoughts, but man, I wish they were here because they're just have this like great expertise on it.
Okay. Sounds like a future podcast episode.
I could definitely connect you. It's super
Yes.
fascinating thinking about it. Of course, I think, you mentioned the DSM-5, which is our main diagnostic manual. And,
But
there
I
has,
didn't give it a number because I still have the 3R on my books.
yeah, it's currently in the
That's how
five.
long ago I went to school.
Yeah. So they, there has been some increase in autism. Some of it for sure has been driven by the way the criteria has changed over time and that there's better awareness of autism,
That's a
people
huge factor as well.
thinking about it more.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those diagnoses that when you have a kid come in with some of this like developmental complexity, that's probably one of the first things that ADHD or some of the first things that providers think about.
Mhm.
One of the things that we're really trying to do, another big project in our lab that's different than the ones we've talked about, is we're trying to help providers get FASD as part of those things they think about when they start seeing complexity. There
Yeah.
are some distinct differences with autism, and FASD for many people. The social difficulties can look different. and the restricted repetitive interests, it's not quite the same for a lot of people with FASD. And of course, they can overlap and you can have both.
Right.
But what I really think is most important is that, as autism got better awareness and your providers are thinking about it more, it's getting more attention and supports, and it's getting people to get accurate diagnoses for that.
Yeah.
So what I
Well,
think
the better able you can recognize something, then the next thing that follows recognition is identification, right? You're putting it on paper saying, yes, this is it.
so I know when we spoke a year or two ago originally about the FMF Connect app,
Mhm.
in the intervening years since we've last talked, we have developed a program called FMF Connect Pro. And so, what that program is doing is trying to get these clinicians who have pretty introductory or entry level knowledge about FASD, which, by the way, is the vast majority of mental health providers because they don't get trained in it. Like, it's not their
Right,
fault, it's just
right,
not part of the training
right,
program.
right.
And
Well,
so,
because the people at the universities, in whether it's nursing or medical school or social work or psychology, you can't
education.
teach what you don't know.
It's not part of it. So those folks, we're trying to make it an accessible way to learn about this in a way that, they don't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of resources. So we're finding things that are like brief, short, and it supports them because no one wants to identify or diagnose FASD if there's not something they can do about it. So what we're teaching them how to do is to screen everybody, to do the DSM-5 diagnosis for FASD, and then to support families in using the FMF Connect app that we talked about before. So it makes it more supportive. They don't have to learn quite as much. They can learn some key principles and then they can flexibly adapt. So that
Mhm.
study's also recruiting. I could send you that information too. That we're recruiting mental health providers. But our goal is to get,
That would be awesome.
my goal is to get them to have your providers who are seeing kids to have not only autism and ADHD in their mind when they're thinking about diagnosis, but like, oh, I wonder if this is FASD. Let me ask about prenatal exposure and then let me think about which of these diagnoses might better capture what we're seeing here.
And
So,
hopefully one of the things that's included in provider preparation is how to ask those
oh
sensitive
yes, we
questions,
have a whole session on that.
right? Because I mean that's where you're combating stigma.
Yeah, we have a
Uh,
lot of focus on stigma.
yeah, coming alongside a parent and saying, what was life like prior to pregnancy in the early phases when you were, before you knew for sure?
Yeah, and that's exactly how we talk about it too. And
Yeah,
it, there's a lot of pervasive stigma, as we well know, and there's a lot of stereotypes about who people think
yeah,
have prenatal alcohol exposure and who they think don't. And there's, I don't think there's great data on it, but a lot of people sure talk about that.
yeah. I
Because of those stereotypes, some people get autism diagnoses because people don't think there would be prenatal exposure, and other people, oh, well, we assume that, so they get FASD, which so there's a lot of disparities there.
Yeah, yeah. I remember Ken Jones sharing with me, trying to think if it was during the first or the second interview I did with him, but at one point we were talking about the stigma,
Yeah.
and he quoted someone else in the field who did so much research around stigma. The finding was that women face more stigma for drinking while pregnant than for being a convict.
Yeah. And that was Pat
She's
Corrigan.
like, are you
Yeah.
kidding?
And I think it was FASD was more stigmatized than incarceration,
Yeah,
substance use disorder, or mental health.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and that I thought was a really fantastic study. I send you the link if you are curious to read
yeah.
through. And there's a lot of disparities by racial, ethnicity, and
Yeah,
other factors that just really unfortunate. The stigma really underlies so
oh,
much
so
of
much
the
pain,
problem.
no matter what the issue is. It's just so much pain
Yeah, for sure.
and missed opportunities. I think so many providers are like, yeah, but you can access services if we call it this instead. So we're going to do that so that you can get services. Well, we really need to fight for those services for FASD because, you know, autism doesn't come with a higher comorbidity for 428 physical conditions the way FASD does. You know, so it's part of the medical history is knowing you have those predilections to so many things going wrong.
Yeah, I agree that, just calling it something else because it gets you the service. We want people to get the services, but we need to like fight for
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
that equity to be able to get what you need.
I know last week the Support Act was getting marked up, and what's left of the FASD Respect Act is Section 104 of the broader Support Act. I haven't heard anything yet. Have you?
I have not heard an update. I was actually going to follow up this week with Chris Melfi to
Yes, I'm on pins and
see
needles.
how that to see what came of that, or if it's still in the holding pattern.
Yeah, yeah. I'm waiting on with bated breath to find out what's going on there.
For sure.
So, okay, so we've covered three things that my audience can be helpful with. Anything else going on at U Rochester
You
that
have another hour. I mean, our team has been really prolific. Like I have one of my students is actually running a DBT trial for adolescents for that's a really common therapy. And she's testing that within a mental health setting and a community agency here. That's been really great. Seems to be going pretty well. We're excited about that. And then another
so
one of my
all the subjects are clients of that particular center?
well, there were folks that in New York but it's via telehealth that we were able to recruit. So that one has been recruited. We also have a study um, doing a needs assessment with nurse practitioner training programs, because that's another program. We are looking at increasing the number of diagnostic providers, and NPs are fantastic with the right training. So we're looking at
Very
kind of
thorough.
what kind of curriculum would be well suited and accessible for NP programs. So we're doing a needs assessment. If there are nurse practitioner training directors for programs across the US, I have a survey that my colleague who's an NP here at U of R developed, that we're trying to learn what would fit and what the needs are to fit within that. So I have that.
So
We have
are you going to any NP conferences to put that need out there?
my NP colleagues, maybe. I know that they were at a couple of like developmental behavioral related conferences and things recently talking about that.
Because I know so many people in medicine are getting out because it's such a hostile climate these days with not getting adequately compensated because insurance sucks up everything. Not wanting to put everyone through every test imaginable just for the purpose of CYA. I totally understand it, but it seems like at least here, moving into this fairly rural community, trying to get in with an MD is several months out. Getting in with an NP, a nurse practitioner for physicals, just general checkups, whatever, much more accessible.
I was gonna say, I don't know about your experience, but I've had a lot of health issues this last year, and some of the best care I've gotten have been from NPs this year. So I love
Yeah,
NPs. So
yes, I do.
our team is really thinking about like, how do we increase access to diagnostic care? And
Mhm.
there are many clinics that are predominantly run by NP providers. And so our team uses a lot of NP providers in our diagnostic clinic, and they do a fantastic job. And so I think are a part of the workforce that we could really leverage, who are well suited to supporting people with chronic health conditions, which FASD is, and many of the comorbid conditions. So that's a really exciting study that is actively recruiting too. So I can send you those. We
Okay.
also have a documentary that we're working on that should be done by September that's really focusing on stigma. We're super excited about that. It's focusing a lot on adults with FASD and
You filmed a lot of interviews with folks at the conference in Seattle, did you not?
we have been filming for that documentary for several years, and it has taken a little while to find its shape and its story. But we now have a full script and a runtime, and now we're just doing our finishing pieces and trying to get that, it's like you're so close and you just need like this much more funding to finish it up. I think we're gonna get there, but anybody would like to help fund our doc, we need about 50,000 left. So we have that.
Action number 5 or 6 or 7.
So we're trying to wrap that up. We actually would love to have it ready in September to show at a couple of different venues, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting.
How will that be marketed?
It's a great question. We're still
Try to
exploring that.
ask those.
Yeah, we're still exploring that. We've got I know the CAN FASD meeting, and we're talking to folks at Impact Week to see if that might be something we can show at both of those venues to get us started. And then sky's the limit, right? Figuring out where it would be, it's going to be produced with the standards that it could show on Netflix or something if we so chose. But yeah.
What about for like CEUs for NP school or
Yeah.
school or the NASW or the
Sure.
APA?
We've sure thought about that. That's something that we could definitely look into too. And thinking about stigma.
Because all of us need continuing education hours, right? No matter what our particular discipline, that that might be another venue for you.
Yes, and we have gained some familiarity with continuing ed as our FMF Connect Pro project provides free continuing ed for providers who enroll. And so we've gotten to really for our social work, psychology, and counseling. So we're familiar with accreditors and what they need
Yeah.
and providing those CEUs for those programs. So that's
Yeah.
definitely a great suggestion that I've had the thought of, but it was a nice reminder to think about that some more as we get that final product in hand and what we do with it.
Or the FASD collaborative project. Maybe
Yeah.
that might be another venue for you as
Yeah,
well.
for sure. And we probably, with all the filming we've done over the last like 4-ish years, we probably have enough video assets for like 2 more documentaries or more. And we have amazing stories from folks. I spoke with Ken Jones and really got to hear from his perspective, like how FASD came to be. And so we've got that video recorded. We've got all kinds of different elements, people's experiences and all of that. It's figuring out like what hooks people in to tell the whole story. And that takes some time to figure out and craft. So hoping we get this documentary out this September, and who knows, maybe it could lead to a couple other really interesting docs.
Yeah.
Our goal
Yeah.
is to really show the whole person rather than to stigmatize doom and gloom, because
Yes.
that's kind of what's out there, and that's not the whole story about FASD, and we really need to address the stigma head on, which is the main focus of this one.
I remember being at an FASD Now conference, which is a California association. It was probably 2.5 years ago at this point. I happened to be in a breakout group with Ken Jones, and that's how I first got to know him, and Justin Shepard.
Yeah.
And I had figured it out a while ago, but I was still kind of wrestling, because it feels like coming out when you are, how much do I share with whom, why, all that kind of thing. And I remember Justin saying, the only way past the stigma is straight through it. Never dreaming that within 6 months I would have my book almost launched, would be launching the podcast.
Yeah.
In that short order. I mean, if we hadn't had that conversation, Who knows? I might still be gun shy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was fantastic advice, and it was kind of humorous because Ken Jones was watching the screen. It looked like he was watching a tennis match.
Nice.
But Christy, thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's such a pleasure.
And I look forward to getting those links. This conversation will be out next Monday.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, I look forward to getting the links out there for everybody. Please keep me posted as to, if you're getting the recruits that you need. And as other projects come up onto the university's plate, let me know always how I can be helpful.
Absolutely. And I encourage folks to keep an eye out if you are in the DC area or are able to travel to there. We have our Impact Week coming up in September. And there's also the Move FASD, which was the Run FASD 5K. I believe it's
Oh, they
transitioned
changed
to,
the name.
I think we're doing Move FASD this year just to be more inclusive. Running is not everybody's game, but everybody can move in some
Yeah.
way. So keep an eye out for those. They're coming up soon and love to help. Really, we should have awareness all the time efforts
Yeah.
for FASD, but in
Yeah.
September especially can be a great time for us to
Yeah.
all come
And I
together.
know you've had a team runners for Run Fast every year.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we try to grow each year and we're getting there. I think we might have hit 100 last year.
Yeah.
So um,
Well, I haven't been in this community long enough to have anyone help with the legwork of doing anything locally. Hopefully at some point I will be able to do that, but I'm kind of landlocked at the house as long as I'm caring for my mom. So
maybe you could host a
a
virtual
virtual one.
all together, silent disco or something. I don't know. Get some of your listeners to give some ideas. That could be fun to do a like everyone hop on Zoom together on YouTube and
That could be
have a
good.
move party.
All right. I will
I'll
definitely
put
think
that
of
challenge out there.
that.
Send Patty your ideas of how we could do this virtually.
Right?
Better yet, someone offer to host it. So
That would be awesome.
that'd be fun.
All right, Christy, thank you
Well,
so,
thank
so
you.
very much for your time. I look forward to our next candid conversation, but it's always a pleasure to have you on Living with FASD.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Living with FASD Candid Conversations with Patti Kasper. Feel free to send comments, questions, and topics you'd like to learn more about, hear more about, to me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com. Please remember to like, follow, and share this podcast on whatever platform you use so that more people can find the podcast. Have a blessed week, everyone, and tune in next Monday for another candid conversation on Living with FASD.